This is part 7 of my series dealing with group counseling and role-playing games. And this is going to continue to talk about the basic skills for GMs to have in a group. The use of your eyes. Knowing how to use your eyes is very important when leading groups. The GM needs to be aware of how her eyes can gather valuable information, encourage members to speak, and possibly deter members from speaking. The GM's eyes can be used in 4 ways. Scanning for nonverbal cues, redirecting members' comments to the group instead of just to the GM, drawing out members, getting people to speak when you think they want to speak, and cutting off members, basically the people that are dominating the group or being spotlight hogs. You can redirect the spotlight to other people. Scanning the group. The leader gathers valuable information by scanning the group with her eyes. Although scanning seems like an easy skill, most beginning GMs find this difficult. The reason that scanning is so difficult is that when people are talking to you, it is natural for you to look at them. Picture a beginning GM leading a group of 10 members, and that's a lot. The member closest to her left starts talking, and the leader naturally turns her head to look at him. Let's say he talks for 2 minutes about his situation. During those 2 minutes, our beginning GM will have made contact only with him and perhaps with the next 2 members to his left. For the entire 2 minutes, she has made no observation of the remaining 7 members. Here are some of the problems and difficulties this leader might face. Some of the other members may feel excluded since she did not make eye contact with them for 2 minutes or so. The GM has no idea how most of the members are reacting to what was being said because she's focusing on the person saying them. The GM has no idea who may want to speak next because she didn't look over and scan the group to see if there was any verbal or nonverbal cues such as leaning forward, just facial expressions. Sometimes I've even seen people raise their hand like, hey, I want to get in here, don't forget me. Some of the other players may have lost interest because the member talked only to the GM. Okay, these points suggest that if you do what is natural, which would be to look exclusively at the person speaking, misinformation is very helpful to helping run the group. Seeing players' reactions and knowing who wants to add a comment or react makes basically just running the group easier. And like I said, scanning is one of those things you probably should do, and it's really tough to do. Of course, there are situations in which you would want to attend almost exclusively to the talking member, but those situations should be the exception rather than the rule. The rule is to keep your eyes moving. Such scanning is the best way to pick up the various immediate reactions of the members among the most important nonverbal cues, such as head nods, facial expressions, and body shifts. And these would be some nonverbal cues that you can look for when you're scanning the group. Head nods. It is very helpful to look for head nods that basically indicate both agreement and disagreement. The leader can facilitate discussion by saying something like, I notice you're nodding. Do you have something to add? What are your thoughts? Picking up on head nods can also be useful for drawing out and linking one person to another, such as, Jody, you were nodding when Diane over here was mentioning, something interesting. Do you have similar thoughts, or do you have any comments on what she said? Facial expressions. Facial expressions may mean that the player is in some way relating positively or negatively to what you guys are talking about. Facial expressions can suggest disapproval, confusion, or some other reaction that the GM may want to clarify. Body shifts. Players often express themselves through the way they sit and move. Body shifts during the group frequently indicate confusion, boredom, or irritation. By observing these reactions, the leader can often be aware of what members are feeling and can devise some strategies for dealing with a player or a number of players. For instance, if 2 or 3 members are noticeably confused, the leader may want to use the skill of reflection and clarification to basically alleviate that. Possibly giving a mini lecture that may provide some information and, just make things clear that they're not understanding. You can even have like a 10-minute break. One body shift that is important to observe is the forward lean, which often indicates I've got something to say. Beginning GMs frequently do not observe this and other signals from the members. As a result, they may ignore those who are ready to speak and basically call on people that aren't really wanting to to speak up, So look for body clues. So if you think of nonverbal cues and what people are expressing with their body language, you really can use that information to help you to get inside their heads to some degree, to find out what they're thinking and feeling. And if you ignore those cues and information, it's basically just one more resource that you are ignoring that could help you. Okay, the next section is redirecting members' comments to the group. Very often players will speak mainly to the GM unless the GM encourages them to talk to the entire group. Getting players to address everyone can be helpful in building interest, getting players involved, building group cohesion, and creating an atmosphere of belonging. To get players to look at the entire group, or to get them to avoid looking only at the GM, any or all of the following are appropriate. Tell your players that you would like them to look at each other rather than exclusively at you when they are talking. You can explain this in the beginning or after someone has spoken directly to you, and this would get them more involved. Explain to the players that you are not going to be looking at them all the time when they are speaking, because at various times you will be scanning the group. You can also tell them to let your scanning serve as a signal to them to address the entire group. Scan the group, because the talking member will tend to seek eye contact with someone. If you are scanning, he will usually look elsewhere because you're not looking at him. Signal the player to talk to everyone by making a sweeping motion with your hand. A sweeping motion means talking to your right hand, or taking your right hand, and basically just moving it across like that. Sometimes the GM will need to be persistent in redirecting members if they address only the GM. There is a good chance that the GM member interaction pattern, like I said, it's like the player, then you, then the player, then you, will develop, making GMing much more difficult. In most groups, the GM is trying to get members to work together and to feel support and concern for each other, and just role-playing amongst characters, getting them involved so it's not just all you're giving them more spotlight time. And you let them talk. It basically just gets the players involved more, I think. The next section is drawing out members. Another way the leader may use his eyes to make eye contact with those whom he is trying to draw out. By scanning the entire group and contacting particular members, his eyes can serve as an invitation to talk. Beginning GMs sometimes make the mistake of maintaining eye contact only with those who are talking and not with those who are silent. And this goes back to the silent member again. The GM's eyes can really encourage members to join in and share. Let's say you have a player who has not spoken much and it is already the third session. So you're starting to notice that there's a pattern there where they really don't speak much. Even when it would be beneficial for their player or for their character, they don't speak up. They don't take part in decision making as much, those sorts of things. Observation of this player has shown you that he is scared and possibly shy. Your kind and encouraging eye contact may help this person venture into the group. So instead of scanning the whole group or just looking at the person that's talking, you look over at the person that's silent. And if you maintain that eye contact, for a decent amount of time, not staring holes in them, because that's uncomfortable too, but it's just an invitation. It's not telling them they have to talk, but it is a nonverbal cue that what do you want to do, or you maybe hold your hand out or something like that. So things like that can invite a silent member to speak up. Once drawn out, this type of member may speak only to you. You may want to allow this at first, and then as he becomes more comfortable, ask him to talk to the entire group. So let's say that you're trying to get this player that's silent to have a role-playing discussion or an interaction with another character. At first, it's okay. Just let them talk to you. Even though they should be talking to the other player, let them talk to you until they get comfortable just speaking and being around these people that are in the group. And eventually, you might put your hand out to the person that he's actually talking to, or you might say something eventually like, why are you talking to me? Talk to Rolfgar, the dwarf over there, or something. Encouragement through eye contact and body language may be just what the member needs. Another example of when the leader may wish to maintain eye contact with only one member for a long period of time is basically, that's what you want to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, instead of scanning your eyes across, just focus on that one player to basically get them or encourage them to keep speaking. Usually this does not make other people feel ignored because they realize what's going on. They're like, okay, you know, Tim the GM there is trying to get, you know, Frank over there to participate, and they might actually help you encourage them. You know, those would be your like allies in the group. Another way for the GM to use his eyes to draw out a member is to make eye contact with that person a number of times while speaking to the group as a whole. So you look at them more often than everyone else. Of course, there will be times when this would not be effective, and you must be aware that this technique must be used with care and concern for your members. Unfortunately, some beginners misunderstand this technique and end up using eye contact as a spotlight, creating undue pressure on a member to respond. Like I said, you can go too far with this. If you're staring too much at a person, they might get creeped out, like, dude, why are you staring at me? You know, so just use it sparingly. Cutting off members. Often there will be one member who tends to speak first on any issue or question, or they do more of the role playing. There may be times when the leader will want someone else to comment first, perhaps just for a change or because the talkative member is negative or long-winded. When the GM knows that she is going to pose a question to the group, she can use her eyes to control the talkative member. By looking at the member as she starts to ask her question, and then moves her eyes away. So you would look at the talkative member, and then just look to everyone else. It's a very subtle way of dissuading them from talking first and showing them that you want input from everyone. Yeah, and finish your question when you are looking away from the talkative member, perhaps at one of the silent members. By doing this, the GM subtly invites others to respond and avoids the talkative member's nonverbal overtures to comment. Certainly, this does not work all the time, but it can be very effective. So it's one of those very subtle things that you can do to kind of dissuade a very domineering, dominant player from being the first to respond. One other way in which GMs can use their eyes to help in cutting off a member is by not attending to the member when she is speaking. That is, if the player has gone on and on for a while, a very subtle but often helpful cutting off technique is for the leader to avoid making eye contact with her. Players frequently will wind down sooner when the leader is not attending to their comments. So if they're talking for like 5 minutes and it's like, dude, you know, shit or get off the pot, you know, seriously, you're taking up all the time, or maybe it's even longer, 10 minutes. Instead of staring at them all the time, you start looking at the other members that are probably bored by this time and might even be slightly irritated that this player is taking up so much of the time. To summarize, by moving your eyes, you will be in contact with your members and more aware of the energy and thoughts and possible emotions of the other players. By scanning the group, you will have a better sense of what to do next. All in all, the GM who scans will have a much more data than the leader who doesn't. The use of your voice. The leader's use of his voice is another skill that many beginning GMs overlook. Our discussion here will cover how the leader's voice can be used to influence the tone and atmosphere of the group as well as its pace and content. Setting the tone. The leader conveys how a group will be led both by the content of his words and the tone of his voice. A very strong, dominating voice usually indicates that the leader is going to run everything, whereas a firm yet caring voice communicates a responsible and facilitative role in the part of the leader. It is not that one voice pattern is better than another or that you should develop only one pattern. Different kinds of groups with different members need and demand different types of styles of leadership. Some GMs have what you could be called a very warm voice, while others have somewhat formal voice. Try to listen to your voice pattern. Perhaps using a tape recorder, like I said, that helped me out a lot. Well, not tape recorder, but just, audio recording software. You will want to develop more than one voice pattern, since at times you will need to vary the tone of the group and your voice in that process. And especially if you're going to take on the roles of different NPCs, you want to adjust your voice. Be sure to be aware of the message that your voice is sending. Sometimes you want the group to be serious, and sometimes you want them to have fun, be quirky and silly. She will also want to express in both words and voice tone that the members will be playing a major role and that they should participate. The warm, encouraging voice certainly helps the scared, troubled, or withdrawn members. And just, the pitch, the volume, the rate, these can all communicate things that you might not even be aware of. Energizing the group. In many kinds of groups, the GM's energy and enthusiasm will help to energize the members. And this is all we've talked about this in the past. Pacing the group, just keep an eye on the time. Your voice can really affect things, the way you ask things, leading questions, things like that. You will most likely be surprised at how much influence your voice has on things like pacing and these other things we're talking about. A good leader is one who has enthusiasm for what he is doing. If at all possible, the GM should take a break of an hour or two before the group session. Just kind of get in the mindset, I think. I don't know, maybe play some music before. And just make sure you have energy and you're excited about it. If you're rushed or feeling stressed or you're feeling a little bit of GM burnout, it doesn't really help out the group. I mean, it's one of those things that's tough. Just try to prevent it. Because if you're not excited, your players won't be excited. Identifying your allies. Just look around the group and see who is participating. Some of these allies might become dominating players eventually, but they tend to help you. They, like the GM's helper, they'll help get other players to roleplay. They'll bring excitement to the group just by playing their character in an exciting way. If there's a silent member, they'll address questions to them, things like that. And these players are the ones you're like, yes, I'm glad I have that guy here. I'm glad I invited that guy. Although you will want to be careful not to play favorites in the group, because then you're just ignoring everyone else. So there's lots of skills for becoming a GM. I could go into more, but I'm going to move on because this series is going to be pretty long as it is.